So, here is a fun thought experiment. You grow up being told that the deal is simple. Go to school, work hard, get a degree, get a job, save money, buy a house, retire. It is a clean sequence. It is almost elegant. The kind of thing you could write on a napkin and hand to a 17-year-old and they would nod and say, "Yeah, okay, that makes sense." Now, imagine that same 17-year-old does all of it. Does everything right, gets the degree, gets the entry-level job at $42,000 a year. Opens the bank app every Friday, watches the number go up by roughly $1,100 after taxes, then watches it go right back down when rent clears, then watches it go down a bit more when the student loan payment hits. Then down again for groceries, which cost noticeably more than they did 3 years ago. And at the end of the month, the number left in that account is not a down payment. It is not an investment portfolio. It is a number that would not survive one unexpected car repair. Buyers need to earn around $112,000 to afford the median-priced home in the United States, which is roughly $25,000 more than the median household income. So, the job that was supposed to start the sequence does not even clear the entry requirement for Step 3. The unemployment rate for 16 to 24-year-olds recently hit 10.8% compared to 4.3% overall. And 1/3 of Gen Z says they believe they will never own a home. 1/3. Not a fringe group. Not the unemployed. 1/3 of an entire generation has looked at the math, run the numbers, and quietly concluded, that part is not for me. So, here is my question. Is that a personal failure, or is the machine broken? We are going to explain exactly how the economic machine works, why it stopped working the way it was designed, why Gen Z is the first generation to call it out publicly and in large numbers, and what that actually means for anyone trying to build wealth right now. Not motivation. Not theory. A systems-level breakdown of what changed, why it changed, and what the rational response actually is. The machine is the metaphor I want to use throughout this. Think of the traditional economy as a vending machine. It was built on a simple premise. You put in the right coins, effort, credentials, time, obedience. You press the correct button, and the product comes out. House, stability, retirement, a standard of living slightly better than your parents'. The machine worked for a few decades, and a lot of people got what they paid for. The problem is not that people stopped putting in coins. The problem is that the machine changed what it accepts, changed what it dispenses, and nobody updated the instructions on the front. Gen Z did not refuse to use the machine. They walked up, read the instructions, inserted the coins, heard the familiar mechanical noise, and then watched nothing fall out. And instead of blaming themselves, which every previous generation was trained to do, they took a step back, looked at the machine, and said out loud, "I think this is broken." That is not pessimism. That is pattern recognition. Let me explain why this is not a vibe is data, and then I will explain what it actually means for how money works now. The first thing you need to understand is what I call the coin devaluation problem. The vending machine still says it accepts the same coins, degree, work ethic, 40 hours a week, loyalty to an employer, but the purchasing power of those coins, measured in actual life outcomes, has collapsed compared to what they bought 20 years ago. Over the last 6 years alone, the income required to afford a median-priced home in the United States jumped 70% from about $67,000 in 2019 to $114,000 in 2025. 70% in 6 years. Well, that is not a blip. That is a structural repricing of access. Meanwhile, what did wages do? Income growth slowed to its lowest level in nearly a decade. And for 25-29-year-olds specifically, annual income growth slowed to 5.2%, one of the lowest levels recorded since 2011. So, the thing you used to pay for life got more expensive by 70% in 6 years, and your income is growing at 5%. That gap is not a coincidence. That gap is structural. That gap is the machine eating your coins and producing nothing. And here is where people get confused. They think this is a discipline problem. They say, well, if you just stopped buying coffee, if you just budgeted better, if you just worked harder and got promoted faster. Okay, let me do the math on that. Say you earn $42,000 a year. After taxes, You take home roughly $33,000 depending on your state. That is about $2,750 a month. The median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in most mid-sized American cities is currently hovering around $1,500 to $1,700 a month. So, housing alone, if you are renting, consumes somewhere between 55 and 62% of your take-home pay. Bank of America data shows Gen Z spending on rent and utilities outpaces all other generations. You have not bought coffee yet. You have not bought food. You have not paid your student loan. You have not bought a car to get to the job that pays for the apartment. The same Bank of America report characterized Gen Z as overeducated and underemployed and concluded that young people spend nearly twice as much as they save. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but that has always been hard in your 20s. Boomers struggled, too. Millennials struggled. This is just the normal entry-level grind. And to be fair, early adulthood has never been financially comfortable. But here is the thing you need to understand about the machine. It is not just harder to operate. It has fundamentally changed what it costs to use it versus what it pays out. Median home prices in the United States increased approximately 50% from 2015 to 2024. Our wages for young workers grew at a modest rate of about 15% over the same period. 50% versus 15%. The asset that was supposed to be the finish line of the sequence moved 3 times faster than the income needed to reach it. That is not a timing problem. That is a structural divergence. The machine was recalibrated and nobody told the people inserting coins. Wage gains have consistently increased by less than 7% each year over the last 5 years, effectively producing real inflation-adjusted declines in income. The average annual wage for 2024-year-olds is $41,184 compared to $71,552 for those aged 45-54. So, the age group entering the machine gets paid about $41,000. The age group who owns the assets inside the machine gets paid $71,000. And the gap between what those two groups own in real estate, stocks, and retirement accounts is not comparable. It is generational. It compounds daily. To be fair, none of this is new information in isolation. Housing has been expensive before. Inflation has happened before. Young people have always started at the bottom. The reason this moment is different is not any single number. It is the convergence of all of them simultaneously and the fact that this particular generation is the first one that grew up with enough information access to actually see it happening in real time. They are not imagining the math. They are calculating it on their phones before they even sign the lease. That is where we have to talk about the second layer of the machine problem, and this one is darker. It is not just that the coins lost value. It is that the machine was reprogrammed to serve a different user base entirely. Here is a way to think about it. Imagine a vending machine in an office building. It was installed in 1985. In those days, everyone in the building used it. The junior employees used it. The executives used it. The machine worked for everyone because everyone needed it to work. Then slowly over 30 years, the executives stopped needing it. They had a catered lunch, a company card, a separate kitchen on the executive floor, but the machine kept running. And because of the people who set the prices no longer depended on the machine, they started setting prices in a way that was convenient for other reasons: property value, tax structure, legacy asset protection, not for the person standing in front of the machine with $1 and hungry. The persistent inconsistencies between housing supply and demand, compounded by soaring rents, restrictive zoning, and stagnant real wages, pushed home ownership further out of reach. From 2020 to 2024, typical rents increased by nearly 29% while median household income rose far more slowly, leaving nearly 1/3 of American households cost-burdened. Restrictive zoning, that is not a market failure. That is a policy choice made by people who already own property to protect the value of property they already own using the political systems they already dominate. The machine did not break by accident. The machine was adjusted by people who had already gotten their product out of it. About 67% of Gen Z adults say they struggle to cover housing costs. By comparison, slightly more than half of millennials and Gen Xers reported difficulty, and 36% of baby boomers said they struggle. 36% of boomers, 67% of Gen Z. The machine works best for the people who built it, used it first, and then set the prices. Now, I want to make something clear here because this framing can easily slide into grievance politics, and I'm not interested in that. Blaming boomers as individuals is a waste of time. Any individual in any generation responds to the incentives they are given. If you bought a house in 1990 for $90,000 and it is now worth $500,000, you are not evil for not wanting prices to drop. You are responding rationally to your own financial position. This is not a morality problem. This is an incentive problem. The system creates winners who then have a structural incentive to keep the game running the way it is. Attacking people is useless. Understanding the incentive is useful. At 28 years old, 38.3% of Gen Zs owned their home in 2025 compared to 42.5% of Gen Xs when they were 28 and 44.4% of baby boomers when they were 28. So, at the exact same age, each successive generation owns fewer homes. This is a measurable documented generational decline. And in 2025, the share of first-time home buyers plummeted to a record low of 21%, while the typical age of first-time buyers climbed to an all-time high of 40 years. 40 years old. The median first-time home buyer in the United States is now 40 years old. That used to be around 28 or 29. The machine is not just slower. The machine is taking twice as long to dispense the same product. If you are watching this and thinking, okay, this is all kind of grim. Good. Stay with me because here is where it gets interesting, because I am not here to tell you the machine is irreparably broken and you should just accept decline. I am here to tell you that the people who are actually building wealth right now are the ones who understood that the machine was broken, stopped waiting for it, and found a different way to get the product. But first, if this is the kind of analysis you want more of, the kind that actually explains the mechanics of how money moves and how systems reward or punish different behaviors, subscribe. Not because I need the algorithm, but because the next few videos are going to get significantly more specific and more useful, and it would be a waste to stumble onto this one and miss them. Now, the third layer, and this is the one that most people completely miss. It is the inheritance math. Here is the thing about the vending machine. If you grew up in a house where your parents already extracted value from the machine, bought a house for $100,000 that is now worth $400,000, accumulated retirement accounts during the years when markets compounded freely, received promotions at a time when loyalty was rewarded with pensions, then your position relative to the machine is completely different. You are not standing in front of it with $1. You are standing in front of it with $400 of inherited leverage. That changes every single calculation. About $84 trillion is anticipated to pass down from seniors and baby boomers to Gen the 10th, millennials, and Gen Z by 2045. $84 trillion. That is the largest wealth transfer in recorded human history. And about 38% of Gen Z anticipate they will receive an inheritance. 38%, which means 62% will not. And the ones who do receive inheritance will have a completely different relationship to the housing market, the investment market, and the compounding machine than the ones who do not. This is not about discipline. This is about the starting position. Two people, same age, same income, same work ethic. One gets a $50,000 gift from parents to put toward a down payment. One does not. 20 years later, one owns a property that has appreciated by 250% and has built substantial equity. The other has been renting for 20 years and has nothing to show for it in terms of assets. That divergence is not measured in effort. It is measured in what machine access you inherited. One real estate professional estimated that about 30% of Gen Z clients receive some kind of financial assistance from their parents when buying a home. 30%, and those 30% are buying homes. The other 70% are statistically still renting. The machine does not have one line. It has two. And which line you are in has almost nothing to do with how hard you work. Let me give you a concrete case study. I want to walk through a character I will call Marcus. 24 years old, grew up middle class, parents rent, no inheritance incoming, first generation college graduate. He did everything right by the old rulebook. He graduated with a degree in marketing, student debt $38,000. That number is not chosen randomly. The average student loan debt for new graduates reached $37,338 per borrower in 2023, up from roughly $24,000 in 2010. Marcus gets his first real job at $44,000 a year. He is happy about it. He negotiated it up from $41,000. He is in a mid-sized city, rent is $1,600 a month. That is $19,200 per year just in rent. His take-home after taxes is roughly $34,000 a year, or about $2,800 a month. Rent takes $1,600. That leaves $1,200 for everything else. His minimum student loan payment is $380 a month. He is now at $820 left for food, transportation, phone, health insurance, clothing, and emergencies. He cannot save meaningfully. He is not lazy. He is not making poor choices. The math simply does not work. Now, Marcus does the thing everyone tells him to do. He gets another job. He job hops. 3 years in, he is at $61,000. Better. He is now taking home around $47,000, roughly $3,900 a month. He moved to a slightly cheaper place to get rent down to $1,400. He is now saving about $800 a month after loans and expenses. That is $9,600 a year. In a city where the median home price is around $350,000, a 20% down payment would be $70,000. At $9,600 a year in savings, Marcus hits that number in about 7 years. He is now 31. Except that by the time he has saved $70,000, the median home price in that city has not stayed at $350,000. It has historically appreciated. At even modest appreciation of 4% annually, that same house costs over $450,000 in 7 years. His down payment needs to be $90,000, not $70,000. He spent 7 years running forward and the target moved faster than he ran. This is not a Marcus problem. This is what it looks like when the speed of asset appreciation systematically outpaces the speed of income growth. The machine is moving the target, and most people experiencing this either blame themselves or give up when the actually useful response is to understand the mechanic and adjust the strategy. A striking 84% of Gen Z aspiring homeowners report delaying major life decisions until they can afford a home. 84% are waiting for the math to make sense, but the math does not fix itself while you wait. That is the trap. That is the part nobody explains clearly enough. Now, let me give you the first comedic cutaway because I think we need one. Imagine a 45-year-old LinkedIn influencer posting, "I bought my first house at 26, worked 80 hours a week, never complained, saved every dollar." No excuses. The American dream is alive if you want it badly enough. His first house cost $118,000. Mortgage rate 6.5%, which was considered high at the time. Monthly payment roughly $750. His entry-level job paid $38,000 a year. His housing cost was about 24% of his take-home income, completely manageable. The same house today costs $480,000. At 6%, the monthly payment is about $2,300. The entry-level equivalent job pays $42,000. Housing cost is now 82% of take-home income. Same house, different machine. The assets appreciated because the economy was growing and you held them long enough to benefit. That system worked when several conditions were true simultaneously. 1. Wages kept pace with asset prices. 2. Institutions were rewarded long tenure. 3. The main appreciating asset, which was housing, was accessible at the entry level on a normal income. 4. The cost of credentials was modest relative to the returns they generated. Income for Americans, adjusted for inflation, is essentially the same as it was 5 years ago, meaning many workers are not getting any richer. Condition 1. Broken. Wages are not keeping pace. The US labor market has cooled as AI fears and tariff-driven economic uncertainty create an era of job hugging, with companies thinking more conservatively about expanding jobs. Condition 2, deteriorating. Institutions are not rewarding loyalty the way they once did. They are holding on to existing workers out of fear rather than expanding career paths. Home prices remain historically high and buyers still need to earn about $112,000 to afford the median-priced home. Condition 3, broken. Access to the primary appreciating asset on a normal income is basically gone for most people in major markets. Average student loan debt for new graduates has increased dramatically from roughly $24,000 in 2010 to over $37,000 in recent years. Condition 4, inverted. The credential now costs significantly more and reliably produces the same or worse financial outcomes relative to the cost. All 4 conditions are broken simultaneously. That is not a recession. That is a structural shift in how the machine operates. And here is the thing that matters for wealth building. Structural shifts do not reverse, they get adjusted to. The people who recognized the internet shift in the 90s and adjusted their strategies got rich. The people who kept betting on physical retail through the 2000s lost. The structure shifted and the rewards followed the new structure, not the old one. So, what is the structural shift happening now? This is where I think most people get it wrong. They think the shift is the economy is bad, so get a side hustle and cope. That is the wrong read. The actual shift is deeper. The shift is from labor as leverage to asset as leverage. In the old machine, your labor was your primary leverage. Work more hours, earn more money, get a better credential, earn more money, work for more years at the same company, earn more money. Labor was the input that the machine rewarded. In the new machine, what gets rewarded is owning something that scales without your direct labor input. A piece of software, a content platform, a financial asset, a business that runs systems, or at the most accessible level, an investment position in assets that are appreciating faster than wages. Gen Z leads the country in digital literacy, content creation, and side hustles. Half of Gen Z say they aspire to start their own business, according to McKinsey. They are the most entrepreneurial cohort in modern history, and I think this is important not because entrepreneurship is the universal answer. Most businesses fail. Most side hustles produce less per hour than a minimum wage job when you account for unpaid time. That is a fact. But the instinct to find income that does not require trading an hour for a fixed dollar, is the right instinct. The instinct is correct, even if most of the implementations are wrong. Let me be specific. There are 4 ways people are actually building wealth outside the broken machine right now, and I am not going to give you a motivational list. I'm going to explain the mechanism of each one and why it works. 1. Owning equity in income-producing digital assets. This means a YouTube channel, a newsletter, a software product, a content library. The mechanism that makes this work is not passion. It is the ratio of marginal cost to revenue. Once a piece of content exists, it can earn money indefinitely without requiring proportionally more labor. That is leverage. The same $100 you would earn by working 3 hours at your job can also come from a video that cost you 3 hours to make once and earns passively for 2 years. The time input is the same. The output is structurally because it does not require your continued presence to keep earning. 2. Financial market exposure with asymmetric positioning. This does not mean gambling. It means owning index funds inside tax-advantaged accounts consistently starting as early as possible. The early career period is where investment gains can compound most effectively, which is precisely the period that gets sacrificed when housing costs consume every dollar of income. The people who find a way to invest even modest amounts in their early 20s are not lucky. They are operating the compounding mechanism at the right point on the curve. Someone who invests $500 a month from age 22 to 65 at historical average market returns of around 8% annually ends up with roughly $2.20 million. Someone who starts at 32 with the same input ends up with under $1 million. The difference is not the amount invested. It is the 10 years of compounding at the beginning. That compounding window is the most valuable financial resource a young person has, and the broken machine is designed to consume it entirely in rent and debt payments. 3. Geographic arbitrage on housing. More Gen Zers are migrating to affordable regions like the Midwest, where median home prices are closer to $300,000. This sounds simple, and it is. The vending machine is broken in New York. It is less broken in Columbus. The same income that cannot support asset accumulation in San Francisco can absolutely support it in the secondary market. The system-level move is to operate where the machine still functions at a reasonable ratio and accumulate assets there rather than spending a decade waiting for the expensive market to become affordable. 4. Skill arbitrage in the labor market. The job market is not uniformly bad. It is bifurcating. The unemployment rate for new college graduates averaged 4.59% in 2025, up from 3.25% in 2019. But that aggregate number conceals an enormous variance. Unemployment for a recent graduate in liberal arts from a mid-tier school is significantly higher than unemployment for someone with demonstrated skills in AI prompt engineering, data analysis, cloud infrastructure, or B2B sales. The machine is not broken for all inputs. It is broken for undifferentiated labor inputs. If what you are offering is the same as what 10,000 other applicants are offering, the machine does not need to pay you much to attract you. If what you are offering is specific, proven, and scarce, the machine pays a premium. This is not motivation advice. This is supply and demand applied to labor markets. And, let me give you the second comedic cutaway. Someone in the comments of my last video said, and I am paraphrasing, if Gen Z just stopped complaining and worked as hard as the previous generation, they would be fine. Okay. Today, an unprecedented 52% of Americans ages 18 to 29 live with a parent or grandparent, which is the highest level since the 1940s. The 1940s. The last time this many young Americans lived at home was during and immediately after World War II. Not because of laziness, because of the math. The key impediment is affordability, lower starting salaries that have failed to keep pace with inflation paired with rent increases that dramatically outstripped the fixed mortgage rates many parents locked in years ago. For many young adults, moving home becomes a practical way to save toward a future down payment, pay off student loans, or simply achieve basic economic security. They are not living at home because they want to. They are living at home because the math made a decision for them. And complaining about Gen Z's work ethic while describing the 1980s housing market is like complaining that today's runners are slow while comparing their times on a flat track to the times you ran on a downhill slope. But on different tracks, same finish line, different machine. Let me get into something that I think is genuinely underappreciated, which is the psychological dimension of what happens when you realize the machine is broken. Because this is not just a financial story, it is a behavioral one. And behavior is where the actual divergence in outcomes starts to happen. The Harvard Youth Poll finds a generation defined by economic insecurity, deep anxiety about the future, and a corrosive distrust of the institutions that are supposed to help them thrive. Now, most people hear that and interpret it as Gen Z is anxious and disengaged, which is a problem be fixed with therapy or positivity or a better attitude. That is the wrong interpretation. The more useful interpretation is this: when trust in a system collapses, behavior reorganizes around different optimization targets. This is how systems work. People do not stay loyal to institutions that demonstrably do not serve them. They find alternatives, they adapt. And the adapting is not always clean or elegant, but it is rational. Gen Z's rejection of traditional financial prudence is deeper than simply coming of age during an economic crisis. They are more skeptical about their financial futures than millennials were at the same age. As one researcher described it, the economic system their parents are talking to them about is not really going to work out for them in the same way. That is a precise statement. The economic system is not going to work out for them in the same way. Not because of personal failure, because the system changed. The coins they were told to save are not the coins the machine now accepts. Here is the behavioral pattern I find most interesting among the people I observe who are actually building wealth at a young age. They are not the ones grinding the hardest. They are the ones who accepted the structural reality fastest and stopped spending energy trying to force the old machine to work. There are 3 categories of response when people discover the machine is broken. Category 1, denial. They keep inserting coins and waiting. They work more hours. They get another degree. They follow the script more precisely. They believe the product will eventually fall out if they just persist. This group does not tend to build wealth. They tend to build exhaustion. Category 2, pure rejection. They decide the game is rigged, disengage entirely, and drift into a kind of low-commitment existence that minimizes suffering but also minimizes upside. This group does not tend to build wealth either. They minimize losses, but they also minimize gains. The machine is broken, so they never approach a machine again, including the ones that still work. Category 3, system replacement. They assess which parts of the machine are broken, identify which parts still function, and redirect their inputs accordingly. They stop trying to use broken inputs on a broken machine. They find a new machine, learn how it works, and put their coins in there instead. Category 3 is the small group. Half of Gen Z say they aspire to start their own business, but aspiration and execution are different. The ones who execute tend to share a specific quality. They remove the emotional layer from their financial decisions. They are not angry at the economy. They are not in despair about the economy. They are treating the economy like an engineering problem. What is the system? What does it reward? What does it punish? How do I position myself to receive rewards and avoid punishments? Full stop. That detachment is not apathy. It is the cognitive posture that allows you to see clearly. You cannot make good decisions inside an emotional frame. Anger at inequality is understandable, but it does not compound. Despair is accurate, but it does not generate income. The move is to acknowledge the reality. Yes, the machine is broken. Yes, it was set up in a way that favors existing asset holders. Yes, the timing of your birth relative to asset prices was genuinely unfortunate. And then immediately pivot to the engineering question. Given this reality, what is the optimal strategy? Let me get specific about what the optimal strategy actually looks like, because this is where most content about this topic falls apart into vague generalities. There are 3 structural moves that actually change the trajectory. Not hacks, not shortcuts. Structural moves. The first structural move is radical cost compression in the early window. I talked earlier about how the compounding window in your early 20s is the most valuable financial resource you have. The machine is designed to consume that window through housing costs, debt service, and lifestyle inflation. The counter move is to compress costs aggressively during this window, not forever, but specifically during the 3 to 7 year period when your compounding curve is steepest. That means tolerating a living situation that is significantly below your income level. Living with roommates, living in a cheaper city, living at home if the math makes sense and the relationship supports it. It means not financing a car you cannot pay cash for. It means understanding that the discomfort of frugality at 22 is purchased comfort at 35. The people who successfully execute this consistently describe it the same way. They treated their 20s as an investment period rather than a consumption period. In a Santander Bank survey, 6 in 10 Gen Zers, 58% increased their savings with 69% saying they made sacrifices to save. That is actually a promising signal. The ones doing this are not doing it because they were told to. They are doing it because they ran the math and understood the mechanism. The second structural move is acquiring a skill set with genuine scarcity value before age 25. This is not the same as getting a degree. A degree is a credential, a skill set is a demonstrated capability. The difference is measurable in dollars. An entry-level marketing graduate competes with 800 other entry-level marketing graduates for the same $42,000 role. A can build and deploy a working AI pipeline for a business, or who can run profitable paid advertising campaigns with documented returns, or who can write software that solves a specific business problem does not compete with 800 people. They might compete with 20 or 5 or none depending on how specific and proven the skill is. Scarcity plus proof equals pricing power. Pricing power is the way you increase the coin value the machine. That the most dangerous financial decision you can make right now is following a financial script designed for a different machine. The 401k and buy a house script was written when the machine worked. When wages grew faster than assets, when the housing entry point was accessible on a normal income, when employer loyalty was rewarded with long-term security. Some of those elements still exist in some contexts. A 401k with employer matching is still one of the highest guaranteed returns available. But the script as a whole, the linear sequence, the assumption that if you follow the steps the product will come out, that script is outdated operating instructions for a machine that has been quietly reprogrammed. The people building wealth now are writing their own scripts. Not because they are exceptional, because they had no choice but to look at the machine directly, understand what it now actually rewards, and respond to that reality instead of the story they were told about it. Gen Z's disillusionment explains why this generation is no longer playing by the rules as they grow in their distrust of institutions like government, media, and business. And here is the thing that I think most commentators get wrong about this. They frame the distrust as the problem, as if the right policy response is to restore Gen Z's faith in institutions, but the distrust is not irrational. The distrust is the correct output of an accurate model. When an institution consistently fails to deliver the outcomes it promised, updating your confidence in that institution downward is not pessimism, is Bayesian reasoning, is how rational agents are supposed to respond to evidence. The Harvard Youth Poll captures a generation defined by economic insecurity, deep anxiety, and distrust of institutions. For Gen Z and young millennials, instability is not a passing phase of early adulthood, but the organizing principle of daily life. The organizing principle of daily life. That framing matters because it tells you something about the decision architecture. When instability is the baseline, the optimization target changes. You do not optimize for the same things when the ground is stable as you do when it is shifting. On stable ground, you optimize for long-term positioning. You take the underpaid job at the prestigious company because the long-term trajectory matters. You buy the house even when the timing is not perfect because appreciation is reliable. You stay loyal to the employer because the pension rewards loyalty. On shifting ground, you optimize for flexibility and optionality. You take the higher-paying job even if the brand is weaker. You build portable skills rather than institution-specific expertise. You diversify income streams rather than depending on a single employer. You keep more liquidity than classical financial advice would suggest. These are not irrational responses. They are the rational responses to a different set of ground conditions. Gen Z were the most likely of all cohorts to rate the country's economic conditions as poor, and they are correct. Not because everything is uniformly terrible, but because the conditions for their specific demographic are genuinely worse than for other demographic cohorts at the same point in time. The machine is not broken equally for everyone. It is broken most severely for the people who most needed it to work, the ones entering the machine for the first time without pre-existing assets to leverage. And that let me come back to where we started, the thought experiment, the 22-year-old who did everything right. The sequence on the napkin, the coins in the machine, the product that did not come out. The point of this video is not that that person should be angry, or that they should give up, or that the system is irredeemably corrupt and resistance is futile. The point is this: that person's first step toward actually building wealth is to stop waiting for the machine to work the way the instructions said it would. Because the instructions are old. The machine changed. And the product they want is still available. It is just available for a different input sequence than the one they were taught. 1/3 of Gen Z says they believe they will never own a home. That 1/3 is responding to real data. They are not wrong to take the math seriously. But the strategic conclusion is not to accept the outcome as fixed. The strategic conclusion is to change the inputs. You do not need to earn $112,000 in one job to buy a house. You need to earn $112,000 total from whatever combination of income sources gets you there. You do not need to follow the linear sequence. You need to accumulate enough capital through whatever legal and ethical mechanism is most efficient for your specific skills and situation to access the assets that appreciate. The sequence is not the point. The destination is the point. Gen Z refusing to pretend the economy is working for them is not a crisis. It is calibration. It is the generation that grew up with every piece of information in their pocket, finally applying that information to the most important system in their lives. The math does not lie. The data does not lie. The machine is broken in the specific ways I described, and the correct response to a broken machine is not to pretend it is working. The correct response is to understand exactly how it is broken, find the parts that still function, use those, and build around the rest. Here are the 3 practical moves, not motivation, mechanics. 1. If you are under 25, your compounding window is your most valuable financial asset. Protect it. Anything that consumes your ability to invest during this window, an expensive car, a high-rent apartment that exceeds 30% of your income, consumer debt at high interest rates, is costing you not just the money you spend, but the compounding that money would have generated over 40 years. Do the actual math on what $300 a month invested from age 22 to 65 at 8% actually becomes. Run that number. Let it make the spending decision for you. 2. The labor market is bifurcating, the middle is disappearing. Undifferentiated effort at the median income level is not a wealth-building strategy anymore. It is a staying still strategy at best and a falling behind strategy at worst, because inflation keeps moving the cost of life upward regardless of whether your income follows. The move is to develop a specific demonstrable scarce skill that the market prices at a premium, and to do that before you are 30, when your ability to absorb the income volatility of the learning curve is highest. 3. Stop treating the house as the only legitimate form of wealth accumulation. Young Americans are less likely to build wealth through real estate than older generations. That is a structural fact. It does not mean real estate is never the answer. It means the assumption that the house is always the first and primary vehicle is wrong for this machine. Financial markets, digital assets, business equity, and geographic arbitrage all represent alternative accumulation paths that do not require clearing the $112,000 income bar just to enter. The machine is broken in specific ways. It still works in specific ways. Figure out which is which and operate accordingly. If you want to keep receiving this kind of analysis, the kind that breaks down actual mechanisms instead of selling you a feeling, subscribe. This channel is going to get more specific, more useful, and more honest from here. That is not a promise. That is just what I plan to make.